Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host today, and today we're talking about questions and answers around new equipment. And this is part of an effort that I'm engaged in to help small chocolate makers and chocolatier reduce their labor costs and increase their efficiency when it comes to the coming year. Because if you can't control the cost of ingredients, you have to control what it is within your domain to be able to control. And certainly the cost of labor is one of those things. But before we get started today, what I do want to do is remind everybody, no matter where you're checking in from today, go into the comments, the live chat on YouTube, the comments on LinkedIn and Facebook, and let me know where in the world you are connecting from. And then, of course, if you do have questions about anything that I'm talking about or anything related to the topic of equipment that interest you, to put them into the comments. And what I will do is I will put them up on screen, give you the shout out, and I will do my best to answer them during the course of the hour, right? So this is the homepage of the Chocolate Life right now. You can go there and visit it, TheChocolateLife.com. And this episode, as you can see on the scrolling banner at the bottom, this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, like every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, is sponsored by the members of the Chocolate Life. If you're not a member, a free member, or a premium member, go click on the join button, which is over here, and become a member today. And while you're at it, like and subscribe. I don't use Patreon. I'm not doing any kind of invasive network advertising or anything like that. Your support of the Chocolate Life supports what's going on here with episodes of Pod Save Chocolate. And for every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, I produce a post. And here's the post for today. So you don't have to worry about following along with anything that I'm doing. You can go back to this post afterwards and you can say, oh, okay, I want to find this link. So there are going to be resources, not a whole lot in today's post, but if we do start talking about things and I bring up other things, I will put the links onto this post after the episode, and you can follow up on them. With that, let's jump into it. And what I want to do is I want to jump into a couple of questions that were posted. So if one of the perks of being a member of the Chocolate Life is that you can go into the member discussion on every post and you can post a comment and I get notification and I will do my best to respond to them. And before we go there, do a quick shout out to Jin Kim. Hey, Jin, thank you very much. Glad to hear from you today. Again, if you've got some questions, let me know and I will be able to get them answered. I hope to get them answered or at least respond to them over the course of the hour. So let's jump, into some of the questions from today. And these are from, I'm not expecting you all to be able to read this, but I'm going to make it as big as I can. So this is from Mark at Blue Spruce Chocolate. And he asks, what pieces of equipment for craft chocolate makers are missing from the list? And the list that he's referring to is this one. So there is a list at the top of the post. And so let's jump back to this. What list of equipment? Melangers is not one of the things that I am interested in figuring out a way to go and do better. Melangers on themselves. Number one is there are a bunch of dominant suppliers, in the United States, Diamond Custom Machines, Cocoa Town. We have Spectra, who also has got machines, and we have, companies in India and all over the world that are producing melangers. And so the real question becomes, what could someone do to a melanger? And this is the real question mark. What could someone do with a melanger that would be new and interesting and different, right? That would make it, that would give it a reason, like to put it on a container or to put it on an airplane and ship it halfway around the world. Right? So that's the real question here. So what you're doing, you point out to something, which is, you're currently researching uninterruptible power supplies and other equipment. So what are called power conditioners. And, I can go and buy an uninterruptible power supply or a power conditioner today. Here's just one company. I might have spent like 3 seconds looking for them, and this is one that I found. And so it doesn't make sense to incorporate the uninterruptible power supply into the control electronics of the machine. For example, I might want to plug multiple small machines into one larger unit and save money. I don't know, do I really want to ship an expensive machine from, the EU to the US in order to do this? And I mention this specifically because I remember when I sold um, my first small Aura, FBM Aura continuous tempering machine. The workshop that it went into didn't have any 220-volt power, right? And so what we needed to do is the buyer didn't want to buy one here in the United States, so we ended up shipping this hugely heavy, right, and therefore expensive to ship 120 to 220-volt transformer, right? When there was no real reason to. It just, the buyer didn't want to deal with it. But it turned out to it'd be very, very expensive to also supply the transformer. And I think that uninterruptible power supplies, right, and power conditioners fit into that same realm. You will be able to speak to a local supplier, no matter where you are in the world, find something which is perfect built for the voltage and frequency that you're working on, whether it's 120 volt or it's 220 single or three phase here in the United States or something else elsewhere in the world, and you can find something. And also because if I have a number of small machines, then I can plug a number of small machines into a larger unit rather than having dedicated units within each device. So I think that's really important to know. And you're right. If you're running a Melanger overnight, you leave the shop and for some reason the power goes out or anything and the machine shuts down, you're going to come in the next morning and you're going to find your Melanger filled with solid chocolate. And it's going to take a while to melt the chocolate and get it back up and running again. So I understand exactly where you're coming from with that question. But what I would want to say is and this is something that I had a conversation with a maker recently, is that they went away over the weekend and came back to find that the bearings on one of the wheels in their grinder had exploded and the machine wobbled itself right halfway across the workshop, tilted over and spilled chocolate everywhere. Right. And so I think that could be something that would be really interesting to think about. Could I create what I think of as a wobble stopper, right? So is there some relatively inexpensive accelerometer device that I could put either as an aftermarket idea or a manufacturer could include in their machine, so that if they detected a wobble above a certain frequency, what it would do is it would shut the machine down, and hopefully it's connected to a computer and it could send out something which is a warning that says, warning, Will Robinson, this is no longer working properly anymore. So I think that a wobble stopper would be an interesting thing to add to Melanger, and it makes sense, whereas a UPS power conditioner does not, right? Something else that occurs to me, so people who know me know that I helped develop a conch for a dedicated purpose-built conch for craft chocolate makers. It's called the Kligo. It's named after me. So Paul Klee, Klee, Geo Gordon, Geo Kligo, right? Named after me. And with the idea being that I could take the 35 kilo batch out of an ECGC 65, a Cocoa Town Melanger, and put it into the Kligo and do in 2 hours what the Melanger might take 2 days to do. And that makes an enormous amount of sense in terms of efficiency. Yeah, the machine is not inexpensive, but now what I can do is I can use the Melanger as a pre-refiner refiner. So I can take big particles of nibs and big particles of sugar and then be able to refine them down to the particle size that I want, but have a device whose job it is to work on texture development and flavor development, and has tools and the capabilities which are designed that way. And so what I would say is there a way, and this would be interesting, and I think that there is there a way to turn a standard Melanger and give it better conching capabilities, right? So, ooh, what might that look like? What could we? So, how do we take advantage of the motor, right, that's on this machine and do multiple things inside the same device? So, that's a pretty interesting idea. And it's one that I have been thinking about how to implement. I think I know how to implement it. I just need to go to a melanger manufacturer and get them interested in doing it. But the question then becomes, Mark, would you be interested in a refiner, right? So a granite wet mill refiner, which also had enhanced punching capabilities, right? Because that would be interesting. And that would be either something that the manufacturer could offer or it could be offered as a third party add-on. Just really, just to let you know. Right. And as a matter of fact, Mark is in the is in the room today. Hey, everybody from Kittredge, Colorado. And then, oh my gosh, cleaning up chocolate mess is no fun. We're working on remote monitoring. Hey, and Mark, if you have somebody that's working on remote monitoring, first thing is, okay, how would I take sort of like a small, a single board computer? It could be a Raspberry Pi, it could be an Arduino, it could be some other unit, and attach an accelerometer to it, right? And then to be able to tweak the accelerometer, because many melangers have small wobbles to them just naturally, but you could tweak the wobble interface, and then there would be a relay. So you'd plug your device into this device, which would plug into the wall, sort of like a power meter. So the wobble stopper would go into the wall, and you plug the unit into the wobble stopper power connection. And then what would happen is if the electronics um, discovered that it was starting to move around, what it would do is it just turn the motor off, just pull power, right? Because dealing with solid chocolate is probably less difficult than dealing with chocolate everywhere. But if that's something that you're interested in working on and you already have a developer who's working on it, let me know. Be happy to work with them on it. We'll be happy to help commercialize it. And just if you're interested, or if there's anybody who's interested in working on this, let me know. I've obviously thought about it. But again, Mark, when it comes to a melanger, what is it that's missing from the melanger itself, right? That we want to talk about. And I would say that an uninterruptible power supply and a power conditioner is not integral to what a melanger is. But, right, could we improve the conching capabilities of the melanger? So could we make it more efficient as a conch using the same basic device? Right? Is that a possibility? So I'd like to think about that. And then number two is, okay, we have this issue with, all right, the possibility of a bearing going when you're not there and then chocolate going everywhere. How do we deal with that? So what are some other things that we might do? Right? I mentioned in the post for today that what I had done is I had identified one particular um, product idea that I came up with FBM that I still think is a great idea, but we never did. We actually built a prototype, and FBM sold the prototype against my wishes. And it turns out that it wasn't ready to be sold, unfortunately. And what we were thinking about doing is taking the large Kligo, the 100 kilogram tank size Kligo, and then putting a 2-roll refiner on the top of the Kligo. So what you could do is you could fill the Kligo with 100 kilos of liquor and sugar and extra cocoa butter, right? And the Kligo would, do its spinning magic. And then what would happen is that you could pump the liquor through the 2-roll mill. And every hour you would pump all 100 kilograms of liquor through the 2-roll mill. So over the course of 24 hours, what you could do is you could go and refine, or 24 hours or less, you could go and completely refine the chocolate and conch it in one device. I thought that was pretty cool, right? And it turns out that for one reason or another, there were some differences about how the machine should work, and the engineers over at FBM are only willing to take the idea so far. But I still think it's a great idea. The idea of combining a refiner and a conch, right, into the same unit. Because if you think about the bowl that's sitting in a vertical tank, there's enough room to put a roll refiner on top of it. Why not? Why not do that, right? So, oh, and anyway, right. So, this is something that I first came up with, I want to think about in 2015 or thereabouts. The Kliga goes back to 2013 when I saw a tempering machine, an FBM Maestria, being used as a stir mixer for gianduja for one of FBM's customers. So what they would do is they took a Maestria, they put a stirrer on the top of the Maestria, they pump the chocolate through, right? Because it's a tempering machine, but without the tempering unit on, right? So it's all warm. So they're doing all this mixing, right? And then when they got ready to temper, what they did is they just pulled the stirrer off the top of the machine, and they had the chocolate ready to go. So it was a really, really interesting idea. And I looked at it and I said, if you move that off a tempering machine and made it a separate unit, right? You could take something out of a melanger, put it into the conch, and you wouldn't be reusing the same unit. You didn't want to use the tempering machine as the mixer slash conch, because you might want to do these things in parallel, right? But you get the idea. So this is where the inspiration comes from, and that's what I want to think about when I think about a melanger. What can we do to make the melanger a more efficient conch, right? What are the things that can be done? What's missing, right, with the conch? It's not pneumatic pressure, which is, I think, almost a requirement these days for consistent particle size. But what would you do, right? And those are the questions to ask. So yeah, remote monitoring and control would be incredibly helpful. And yes, incorporating conch capability into a melanger would be invaluable. The cost of a separate conch is out of our range. And Mark, you're a regular visitor to the monthly, member AMA calls. And this issue of price and performance, and how do we reduce the amount of labor and manufacturing time with the equipment that we have, is something really, really important to consider. If you want to, I can give you some ideas about how to improve the conching capability of your melangers. The next time, put it on your list. We'll talk about it for the February member AMA call. But this is, if it seems to be interesting, you think the approach is worthwhile, I can go approach somebody and say, would you be interested in exploring this capability for your machines? Because as near as I know, apart from the Kligo, nobody else has built a purpose-built conch for melangers. I mean, you can buy purpose-built conches for ball mills, but the people who are selling conches for ball mills, people aren't using those conches as the output for melangers for many, many reasons. So just to think about those aspects of things. So really, really quick. And so I'm hoping that what I'm doing here is I'm giving you an idea about how I am thinking about things and some of the criteria that I'm thinking about things. So when I'm thinking about, okay, can I build a better coating pan or a pan for panning, right? A machine for panning. What are the specific things that, I mean, I know because I've been in classes where panning has been taught, right? And I've talked with people who own pans about some of what they feel are their limitations. FBM had a 30 kilo and a 60 kilo pan, and I helped sell a bunch of those. So, I've some ideas about, what is necessary there, right? So what is it about a coating pan that I think represents, ooh, how could we do something differently? Or if I'm doing a small roaster, right, what would that roaster be? So what kind of technology would the roaster have? What capacity would the roaster be? What would the price level of it be? These are the sorts of things that I'm interested in getting feedback from all of you about, right, during this call and at any point. Become a member, put your comments as Mark has done in this post, right? So, and then if we were going to do a continuous tempering machine, what would a continuous tempering machine that would look like that's different from what it is that companies like FBM and Selmy are doing, or like GAMI, all these companies that are doing this Archimedes pomade, or this Archimedes screw, right? So if you're going to do a continuous tempering machine for a craft chocolate maker, what would you want to improve, right? And I know from my experience that the depositing capability of these machines is off, right? So it's edge to edge depositing, mold to mold depositing in terms of accuracy and consistency. Now, I'm a huge fan of what it is that Fairbank is doing with their depositing heads. It's, $2,000 on top of the cost of the tempering machine. Is there a way to improve the accuracy and repeatability of a continuous tempering machine just sort of natively? So that would be one thing we might consider about when improving a continuous tempering machine. But as far as you're concerned, what would you like to see being done in a continuous tempering machine, right? So you're currently maybe using a bowl machine, right? So one like Chocavision or maybe something from Hilliard. You could be using a wheel machine like one from JKV. You could be hand tabling your chocolate. There are people who are doing that. You could be using um, cocoa butter silk, right? But you're looking at saying, I really do want to spend less time depositing, right? I want to spend less time tempering, right? How can I just put some chocolate in a machine, let the chocolate temper it? I don't have to worry about it. Let it bing to let me know that it's ready to go. And then what I can do is I can start depositing and deposit accurately from the first time through the last time, right? So what am I missing? Right? What are the things that you want to see in such a machine? It might be, oh my gosh, I own one of these machines and I find them incredibly difficult to clean. Right? Let me know. What is it you find to be incredibly difficult to clean? Right? And we can think about, okay, how do we go about approaching the cleaning issue in a new way? Right? Are there other things that you think could be done to improve the quality of the not the quality, but the day-to-day usability, I think, is the better way to describe it, of a continuous tempering machine, right? So, right, so I am working with a Turkish company on all of these things. So I have worked with them to deliver a completely customized 40 centimeter wide enrobing line for a customer here in the United States. And it has, among other things, a bottom chilled belt. It has a cooling tunnel. It has some specific aspects of the enrobing process just for this client. But the client wanted to be able to drop um, sugar on the back of some of their items. They wanted to be able to drop shredded coconut on the back of some of their items. They wanted to do cinnamon sugar on the back of other items. And so the company that I'm working with ended up building 3 different machines to accomplish those 3 different tasks, because it turns out that the particle size and specific density of all those 3 things mean that you can't do all of them. You can't do any of them well. So in building a Swiss Army knife, you can't do it. Does everything, but it doesn't do any one thing well. And in this particular case, they wanted to make sure that they did everything well. And so this is what gives me confidence that what we can do is we can develop machines which are going to be that are going to meet the needs, all right, of you, the chocolate maker, but and the chocolatier, because I'm going to assume that chocolatiers also want tempering machines and other machines. But yeah, so absolutely, this is why I'm talking to. This is why I'm having this episode, so that people can let me know. You could also email me. You can email me to member.support@thechocolatelife.com, even if you're not a member, and say, hey, Clay, I was watching your episode, and what I'd like to say is this is what I'm looking for in this particular machine, or there's a machine that you didn't talk about that I want to know more about. So one of the things that this particular manufacturer I'm working for, they make ball mills, and the smallest ball mill they make is a roughly 5 kilo ball mill, and the largest stock machine they make is a 200 kilo ball mill. They'll make bigger, and they do make conches to go with them, right? So one of the great things about using melangers is I can go from a small melanger to a big melanger. The recipe is not going to change all that much, but what changes is time. And if I'm going to go, but I can't easily go with exactly the same recipe. I don't have any intuition to go from a 5 kilo melanger to a 50 kilo ball mill. They're not directly compatible. And so it's great to be able to go from a 5 kilo ball mill to a 50 kilo ball mill, right? Because, while there will be a difference in time, the recipes will be identical. And so whether it's a 5 kilo ball mill or a 10 kilo ball mill up to a 200 kilo ball mill, being able to offer those kinds of capabilities. And so, but with all the equipment in between. If you're going to have a ball mill and you want to save time, it doesn't make sense to manually unload the ball mill and manually load the conch. What you'd like to do is you'd like to be able to push a button or have some levers and then pump the chocolate from the ball mill into the conch, and then from the conch into a holding tank, or from the ball mill into a holding tank. So let's say you have a 50 kilo ball mill and a 200 kilo conch. You could do four batches of chocolate in the ball mill, put them into a holding tank, and then pump them into the conch, right? So you're not using the conch as the holding tank, but you need pumps and pipes. You probably want a magnetic trap in there as well, right? So thinking about all these things and putting them together, that's one thing that we're looking to figure out what's the best way to offer these things for a small chocolate maker as they think about scaling up, because scaling up is hugely important. Now, we're also thinking about roll mills. So what's going on with roll mills, right? So I was approached recently about a company that wants to really rapidly increase their ability to produce powder for hot chocolate, right? And right now what they're doing is they're taking their chocolate, they're molding it, and then what they're doing is they're grinding it into a powder. Not into a powder, but it's really into grounds. So it's coarse chunks. And one of the issues that they have is that they need to be able to get the time it takes for those chocolate grounds to melt into hot liquid, whether it's coffee for a mocha or it's hot water. They need to get the entire preparation time down to like under 30 seconds, right, to do this. And so they're thinking about, how do we go about doing that? And so it turns out that a 5-roll refiner is a perfect way to do that. You put your finished chocolate, it could be liquor with some sugar, it could be a finished chocolate. You put it into the small 5-roll refiner. It's a high-speed refiner, which is water cooled, and it comes out the other end as a powder. And so you can go straight from the powder into a weigh pack machine and put it into a bucket or whatever and just ship it and have something which is ready to ship to your customers, right? But a small 3-roll machine, right? A slow speed 3-roll machine, not a high speed 3-roll machine, could be used as an intermediary step. So let's say you have a pre-grinder, right? And the pre-grinder is not really grinding things finely enough. And so if you put them into a ball mill, it's still taking a long time, right? But maybe what you could do is even like skip the pre-grinder step and put nibs into a 3-roll mill. And this is being done. It's an approach which is being used by another manufacturer. But then you could take the output of that refiner and then mix that with, for example, the sugar in your recipe. So the cocoa butter is in your ball mill or it's in your melanger, it's warming up, it's doing whatever it is. And then what you're doing is you're then taking this mixture, whether it's just the nibs, which have been converted into a paste, or just the nibs and sugar. So you basically got, the chocolate, and then you're running it into the melanger or the ball mill. And so what you're doing is you're saying, oh my gosh, I can shortcut the amount of time it takes for the melanger to do its work from 6 to 8 hours to refine the sugar, or 24 to 36 hours to refine the sugar, into something that only takes 2 to 3 hours. I mean, that's really cool. I mean, that's a great way to think about it. And oh, by the way, if you wanted to, what you could do is you could take the output of the melanger or the output of the ball mill and then run it through the 3-roll refiner. It's just a final step to make sure particle size distribution is where you really want it to be. You can fine tune it. And you could use that roll mill to do nut pastes, right? Rather than the ball mill, which would require huge cleaning, and the melanger, right? Rather than having a dedicated melanger for nut paste. So one way to think about having another piece of equipment is that it provides you a lot of flexibility in terms of how you can make the products you make. For example, a three-roll mill could be used as a pre-refiner, and it could also be used as a device to ensure that your particle size distribution is what you want before you put it into a conch, or after you take it out of the conch, or whatever you want to do. It's just, it gives you another creative step. And if you're really, really interested in it, you could run the nibs through and get a powder the first time, or a very, very a paste, right? It may not be powder because it's not cold. It could come out as a paste. You could mix the sugar and other ingredients into it, run it back through the three-roll refiner, maybe twice, right? And then put it into the conch. I mean, you could completely get rid of the melanger step, right? And the ball mill step, and just use the three-roll mill. And I do know that there are companies that started out this way, right? That, oh, let's just use a three-roll mill, and we can make our chocolate that way. And it turns out that, it, it's a real, so there's no conching step in the sense of flavor development when you use a three-roll mill that way. So you do need a dedicated conch when you get done. But it is, if you have a way to automatically feed the products into the three-roll mill, it's an incredibly efficient way to make products. And the way that most people don't think, because most people think, oh, melangers are more authentic, or melangers are cheaper, or whatever, right? Which says that, oh my gosh, is one of the things that everybody needs a small feeder? So right now, you're hand feeding nibs into your melanger. You put a few new nibs in, you wait a few minutes, you put a few more nibs in, you wait a few minutes, you put a few more nibs in, right? When it's all done, you put a little bit of the sugar in, you wait a few minutes, you put more sugar in. What if there were a small feeder where you just say, here's everything I need for this recipe, and it just sort of feeds it in slowly and automatically, right? Would that be helpful? I mean, I don't know how to make one that wouldn't cost a fair amount of money, but maybe if what we did is we did the design for one, and you could go find the bill of materials, so that you could find all the parts locally, and we could say, oh, you go buy this auger from this company, or this vibratory motor from this company, and do X and Y and Z, and you've got one, right? So maybe there's a way to do that, right? But think about it. Is standing there feeding ingredients into your melanger something that takes a lot of time? And if you could find a way to use that time more effectively, more efficiently, doing something else, is that something that you'd like? Let me know. I think it is. I haven't been able to convince a manufacturer that it's worth spending R&D time to develop one, because they don't know what they could, charge for it, right? So if you've got a $1,500 melanger, a small melanger, spending $1,000 on a feeder may not seem like it makes a lot of sense. If you have a 35 kilo melanger or larger, then having an automatic feeder could pay for itself relatively quickly. So what do you think? Quick shout out to Mike, the king at Encore Coffee and Chocolate in Kansas City. Hope it's not freezing cold where you are. It's been generally pretty cool here where I am, and you're all doing well. And I want to thank Mike. I have been talking with both Mike and Mark about, oh, what would you like to see or what do you think the advantages or disadvantages or the features that you might be looking for in a small cocoa roaster? So a fluid bed roaster, for example. There are fluid bed roasters which have been used in producing cocoa and chocolate, or used in roasting cocoa. There are advantages and disadvantages to any roasting style, but what would you like to see in one? So for me, what I want to have there to be at least two thermocouples, so two temperature measurements. I want to make sure that both of those thermocouples are going into a remote computer. So rather than building all of the software interface into a programmable controller on the roaster, that I connect it to a computer which is running a bit of open source software, where I can both record what it is that a roast is doing, but also control the roaster, which I think would be really, really cool. So once I develop a roast profile, right, I can have the computer control the roaster so that I can get more consistent roasting time over time. But what is the capacity of that roaster? And what are the other bottlenecks that you find in the roaster? Is it cooling? Is it loading and unloading? all those sorts of things are things that will make the difference. I mean, is it a price issue? Where are things going with that? And so that's one of the things that I've reached out to a couple of members of this community and have been sharing the feedback that I've gotten from them. And this company that I'm working with in Turkey and I are working on the specifications for a small fluid bed roaster specifically for cocoa in the roughly 10 to 15 kilogram range, at a price which is competitive with other roasters for coffee at about this same size, right? To give you an idea for where things are going there. So from Mark, a cost-effective auto feeder would be helpful, right? So, Mark, if you want to put it in here or put it in the comments in the discussion, what does cost-effective mean, right? So, is there a price point at which you'd say this is just way too expensive? Now, I'm thinking about something that could handle nibs. I'm thinking about something that could handle sugar. Are there other things that you'd like to see being handled by this as well? So we can talk about the difference in terms of particle size and feed rate. I can see that those are issues which will need to be addressed. Um, so let me know what you think about what a price point might be for something like that, and we'll think about how we might go about doing it. Mike, yeah, the feeder would be a great idea. I don't know why the Melanger manufacturers aren't making one and offering one. I do know, right? Which is they don't think they can make money doing it, that's why they don't do it. And so I'm looking for alternative means for getting it to happen. And one of the things we need to do is we need to actually say, okay, there is actually a demonstrated market for doing this. There are people who do want this thing. So Mike is also saying more option in the desktop tempering machines with dispenser are needed. So, Mike, it's interesting. So when you say desktop, I assume you mean tabletop. So what I want you to do is I want you to tell me what capacity, right, you're talking about when it comes to a desktop machine. So Pamati makes one, FBM makes one. I don't think that Selmy makes one. So, and they're, the FBM. Oh, there's a Brazilian company that makes one as well. They're in the roughly 4 to 5 kilogram working bowl, which means you can pull 10 to 15 kilograms per hour of tempered chocolate on it, depending on what it is that you're doing. But if you think about it, the whole idea of having a dispenser, or whether it's a timed depositor or something else on it, is about pulling a lot of chocolate out of that machine very, very quickly. And so a 5 kilogram machine, I've got real problems about maintaining temper. I've got real problems about maintaining the accuracy of the dispenser as the weight of air on the chocolate in the working bowl changes. That's one of the reasons why these machines aren't accurate. When the level in the bowl changes, is because the pressure of the air changes the weight of the chocolate in the bowl, which changes how much chocolate is being transferred up through the screw. I mean, it's really, really complicated, and most people don't think about it that way. So a 5 kilogram machine, a 5 kilogram working bowl machine with anything other than the kind of relatively inaccurate timed dispenser, which you find on machines like the FBM Aura, it's you're adding, these machines are like 7,000 euros right now. I think that's about where the Aura is right now. You're talking about adding, $4,000 or $5,000 on top of that to solve the technical problems. At which point, why not just go to a larger unit, right? Because it turns out it's far less expensive to scale up the size of the tempering machine to be able to handle the kind of throughput you need for a depositor. So I want you to hold on to the idea about why do you think a desktop tempering machine, and what the capacity is in terms of working bowl and how many kilograms per hour, right? And there's another thing to think about that. I know this for true, is that the Aura, the tempering pipe, is really, really short. I mean, it's really short. It's probably less than 30 centimeters. And it turns out that it's really, really difficult to temper especially two ingredient chocolate, when the tempering pipe is that short. And it almost can't be done, right? You need more time to create the crystals and mix the crystals when the viscosity of the chocolate is so high that it doesn't lend itself to this particular application, right? And so one of the things that I learned when we were selling the craft chocolate upgrade for the FBM tempering machines, which I helped work on for one of FBM's customers, is that we needed to go with a tempering pipe above a certain length. So it turns out that it didn't work for the smallest one, which I forget the name of at the moment, it's been so long, or the second shortest one. We needed to go to the next one, the Unica, which is the 25 kilogram working bowl at the time. When we went one size down, the tempering pipe wasn't long enough to reliably temper, right, high viscosity chocolates. And so there are all these issues which need to be factored in, right, which I'm kind of wondering if it makes sense to invest all those resources in such a small working bowl, right? In order to be able to, because you only need, 15 kilograms of chocolate over the course of a day, right, or something like that. So, I know that I'm asking you for your input, and I hear that your input, but this is something that I struggled with for years when I was talking with people with Aura machines. And there's also another machine that FBM made that no longer do. It's called the ChocolateLife. It had the same problem. For a 2-ingredient chocolate, the tempering pipe was just too short. It was great for enrobing and other kinds of things, but when it came to depositing bars, we couldn't reliably temper, especially if you were adding any kind of powder for a functional chocolate. Is a real challenge. I want to just let you go there. Yes, tabletop batch driven. So if you're doing a batch driven tempering machine, right? The batch driven tempering machines tend not to have circulators, right? And so if you don't have a circulator, it's really difficult to have a dispenser slash depositor, which if you're talking about bars, it's really difficult to do. And what kind of capacity is you're talking about? Now, it turns out I'm working with someone right now who's building a competitor to a ChocoVision Rev 2. So it's about the same capacity, but we're specifically looking, this is somebody else entirely, it's not the Turkish company, but we're looking specifically to address, specific aspects of the Rev 2 that people find particularly problematic. There's no plan in the short run to make it any bigger than that. But for example, if you had a tempering machine and you're doing a lot of dark chocolate or milk chocolate, and you need a tempering machine to hold a whole bunch of colored chocolate for decoration all day long, this would be a cost effective, price competitive way to go and do that, and also much quieter, which is one of the issues we're trying to address with the small ChocoVision machines. So tabletop batch driven, yeah, but I'm trying to figure out what are the things that we can do, right? That so here's the other thing. So tabletop batch driven, what are you missing in like in the larger ChocoVision machines that you would like to see addressed? Now, I don't know if you know it, they have an enrober. That thing doesn't work. It's a toy. It doesn't work, right? So what are you looking for? And again, what are the sizes of what are the sizes of the working bowl? How much chocolate do we need to take out? So a little bit more specific in terms of what the requirements are. The company that I'm working with in Turkey is focusing on continuous tempering machines. We need to go and think about a batch tempering machine. FBM does make a batch tempering machine, the Quadro. It's a 10 kilogram machine. And the thing that makes it different from the ChocoVision is that it actually has an active cooling capability. So there is a compressor, and they're circulating, they're not just heating the bowl, but they're circulating cold gas around the bowl. So what you can do is you can bring the temperature down much more quickly, but there's no measured depositor on it, right? So, okay. So just a thought there. So, okay, Mark, nibs and sugar would be the primary ingredients, I think, rather than agreement. I agreed. If you're using Melange for nut pastes or something like that, just that could be another thing. And do you want whole nuts, or are you using nuts which have already crushed to size? Um, it's more of a challenge being a batch-driven maker. You're working in size 10 to 25 kilogram, and there doesn't seem to be a great solution. You're right. It doesn't. There doesn't seem to be a great solution. And one of the reasons why is that the manufacturers can't be profitable making a continuous tempering machine at that size for you. And so that's an interesting question, which is, could we do a batch tempering machine and feed some other form of depositor? So sort of like a one shot. Oh, that might be interesting. So what we do is we'd have a, a purpose specific one shot machine with which would be designed around the mold cavities you've got. And then what you do is you take the chocolate out of your batch tempering machine and pour it into a heated bowl, a heated hopper. That might be something that could be done. And let me think about that. I mean, another thing to think about in doing that is, I don't know if you guys do, chocolate cover, chocolate drops, which you might put drop into nonpareils, or make nonpareils from them. Something like this could be drop tempered chocolate into a pan filled with nonpareils or nuts, and to make chocolate. So there could be other things to do. And actually, that dropping chocolate bits, tempered chocolate into a hopper onto sheet trays, sheet pans filled with nonpareils, is something that I had talked about doing with someone before. And so it makes sense to think about doing that. Um, and so Mike, would something like that work for you? Right. So let me know, and we'll figure out if it can be done. All right. So keep you in the loop, Mark, about options to the Rev 2. Absolutely. I can tell you that the physical prototype is almost complete. There are changes in the physical prototype that need to be made in order to be able to make sure that the tempering algorithms are working properly. But the goal is to have something which is ready to go somewhere in the next 3 to 6 months. I can't get any closer than that. We may deliver sooner than Cocoa Terra delivers. We're certainly looking to do that as well. Mike, maybe the solution is building a better dispenser. Yes, Mike, I think that's the point, right? The solution is building a better dispenser. And so rather than developing a I'm saying, could we develop a relatively inexpensive one-shot or volumetric depositor, which might have one piston or two pistons? It would feed one mold cavity at a time, and that might be manually fed, just to know, right? But what you do is you take the output of a batch tempering machine, whatever that batch tempering machine is, you'd put it into a heated hopper, right? You might have a little mixer, which would keep everything mixed on the hopper, and then drop it into the molds. That could be an interesting idea. I've got my guy in Turkey working on a bunch of different things, and so I want to share, if I can, one of the things that he shared with me, and that is, oops, let me go find it. Where am I? Okay, is this, and so this is the current drawing for a coating pan or a panning machine. And if you're interested, I can share this with you. I'm not going to put it in the post on the Chocolate Life, but this gives you an idea about what the pan is going to look like. So it's not a huge machine. It doesn't have its own stand, and it's standing up. The legs here will be adjustable, so you can get the center of the pan up at about 1.5 meters, somewhere which is convenient to reach in and work. And then an adjustable like 4 inches either side. It's going to have a PLC, so it's going to be digitally controlled. There will be the ability to control. So there's going to be a very, very quick method to be able to replace the bowls on these machines. So you could go from a smooth bowl to a ribbed bowl very, very quickly. You'd use a smooth bowl for engrossing with chocolate, and you use a ribbed bowl when you're either doing the original encapsulation, so and then to do the polishing and glazing steps, you'd use a ribbed bowl to do that. So we want to make it really, really easy to do that. And we're adapting the idea out of like a stand mixer where you like on the front of the motor, you can just take off this little thing and plug accessories in. We're looking at saying, oh, that's a really good idea. Why don't we just take that idea and we'll build that little nut on the back of the on the bottom of the bowl, and you can like change the bowls like very, very quickly. So that's an option that we're looking at. We're also going to be incorporating not just a fan for blowing ambient air. Let me get this off on the screen. We're also not going to be just have a fan for blowing ambient air, but the base machine is going to be including heating and cooling, right? So no matter what it is you're doing, you don't need to have some other expensive add-on, right, in order to be able to go, oh, I want to blow cold air into this machine, and how do I do it? It's going to be a part of what the machine offers from the very beginning. I don't know that the actual hose is going to be this segmented home, but there will be a flexible hose that's associated with this, right? And our goal is to be able to deliver a panning machine, which is going to cost all in heating, cooling, a 50 centimeter bowl, which is roughly 7.5 kilogram capacity, for about 6,000 US dollars. That's the goal, the FOB turkey. That's the goal for what it is we're doing. So heating and cooling, which is and including the smooth bowl, if I didn't mention that, which is a really, really good deal. So there will be a reverse function, so you can reverse the direction of the bowl for short periods of time you need to. The RPM range is going to be from like 15 to 60 with a soft start and stop, and then a continuously variable control of the speed within the 15 to 60 range, whatever that is. And then you'll be able to work with temperatures in either Fahrenheit or centigrade and be able to control the temperature within a tenth of a degree, whether it's a tenth of a degree Fahrenheit or a tenth of a degree centigrade. And all those are going to be standard features of the machine. So what I've done is I've taken everything that I know about this equipment that, in my experience, selling FBM and being in classes where people are teaching panning and saying, okay, what can we do? Now, there's one announcement that I think is going to be really, really exciting about this. I didn't get the confirmation from my manufacturer in Turkey, so I'm not going to talk about it there. But there may be another thing here, which is going to be really, really, it's going to be unique in this for these kinds of machines. And if you're interested in the panning machine, let me know, and I can keep you up to date about what the changes are being made for this. It's going to it's not going to be lightweight. It's going to weigh about 100 kilos with everything inside, because they're using a heat pump for the chilling and cooling, rather than a compressor, a conventional compressor. They're going to be doing this. The heat pump to do this, for the hot air, cold air, and ambient. The fan speed is going to be, it's like it's going to have all the things that you want in the machine for relatively low cost. So just wanted to let everybody know. So I really do want to go back to this, Mike. I think you're right when the idea is to build a better dispenser, right? And how can we build a dispenser that has a lot of flexibility built into it? And I'm going to talk to I'm gonna think about this, and how we might do something like that, right? But what I'd like to know from a volumetric depositor perspective, do you want a single nozzle per cavity, right? And then what the range is in terms of what you're dropping into a cavity. So it might be a minimum of 5 grams and a maximum of 30 grams, and you need to do 2 strokes to do larger, or 3 strokes. Let me know what you think about, okay, should there be 2 nozzles per cavity? Where do you think, just where does your gut tell you you might want to do? Because these are not going to be one shot things, in the sense that you're going to have 2 different two different things you're putting in the mold. It's just going to be a single nozzle volumetric depositor. So on a different note, months ago you had an episode using a black garlic fermenter for silk development. It appears that it's working well. Yay! That's good to know, because I remember the episode, and what I'll do is I'll put a link to that. Mike, if you have it handy, put the link to that episode. Otherwise, I think I know which episode you're referring to. What I'll do to everybody is I'll put a link to that episode into today's show notes, so the post for today. But glad to hear that a black garlic fermenter for silk development, and as I recall, significantly less expensive than the dedicated devices for cocoa butter silk development. So that's good to know. Mark is saying to Mike, can you mention the brand you purchased? Here it is. Harvest and root, only done I can find so far, is only in C, so temperature sensitivity is poor, but it's only $85. Right. So what I might do, Mike, is see if there is a sort of like a physical enclosure, like some small box that you can put the garlic fermenter in, so that you don't have a whole lot of variability in terms of the ambient temperature, so that you can stabilize a certain kind of temperature for what's going on. That might help in terms of the sensitivity. I'm kind of wondering if you were to take, if I don't know if they provide any idea of what the internal circuitry looks like, but if you could play with, like some sort of voltage regulator, like a fan speed dial, whether or not you could dial in a little bit of more sensitivity by playing with the voltage the machine is getting. Without, obviously, you don't want to push it into over voltage, but you could dial it down just a tiny bit, and you might be able to get a little more sensitivity for what is this going on, depending upon the way the machine is built. Without looking at the specs, can't tell you. But this is an example of some of the work that I've done. Oh, you can go and buy a sous vide machine, a sous vide device, which, depending upon the device, could be significantly expensive. Or you can go buy a dedicated unit for doing cocoa butter silk that's going to cost you somewhere between $800 and $2,000. And what are the alternatives, which might be commercially available to do these kinds of things? So this is a good example of where those things are going. And with that, oh my gosh, we're at the end of the hour, and it's I think I got through most of what it is that I wanted to talk about today in terms of the projects that I'm working on. So I'm actively working on this coating pan. I'm actively working on this fluid bed roaster. I'm actively working on these continuous tempering machines. So those are three things that I'm actively working on now. What I'm actively working on seeing if I can find an inexpensive 30 or 40 centimeter wide 3-roll mill to be used as a pre-refiner or post-refiner. So I am actively working on finding a supplier for that. What I will take from this is that, maybe working to develop some remote control device, essentially a wobble stopper for a melanger. So that could be a real cool idea. So we'll take a look at doing that. And then, is there a way to take a melanger and improve its capabilities of conch? Mark, those are two topics that for the next all-member AMA, which is going to be the next all-member AMA. I'm just doing a quick look. Is going to be. I'm looking at my calendar over here, which is going to be in. It's going to be on February 16th, Sunday, February 16th. So if you're interested in joining me, Mark, make a note on Sunday, February 16th. We can talk about those things. Maybe we can start a few minutes earlier if the shop is open at 11. So just, it's a quick note on that kind of stuff. We can talk about that. I can do a little bit more research on a small feeder and see what that means, because it turns out the hardest part of the feeder is what the hopper is. Right. If you have to build a stainless steel hopper, it's not the cheapest thing to do. And then you got balance and other kinds of issues to think about. So we need to take a look at those things. But are there other things that we haven't talked about? Mike, I get the idea. I think it's a really good idea to think about, can I make a better dispenser, right? A depositor, rather than thinking about how do I put that depositor onto a continuous tempering machine. Okay, as I say, this is something that I've looked at. I'll have to go back through my notes and figure out what I did. I do remember working on this quite extensively with someone, and so let's see about what that means. Uh, Let me see about what that means. I think it's a really cool idea. Um, if you're interested in a custom enrobing line, 40 centimeters wide, with a with a with a built-in tempering machine, and we can add belts of any length for what you're doing, and then specifically customize. The one that we worked on was primarily built for bottoming only. And then after you got done bottoming, everything was turned over onto its back, onto its top, and then things were sprinkled onto the cooling chocolate. Whether so, that was a custom thing that was done for this particular customer. Um, a short cooling tunnel, a chilled belt, because the tempering machine is water cooled and there's a recirculating chiller. We could take the cold water and put it under the belt for the cooling tunnel. And so not only was it cooling on the top, but it was cooling on the bottom at the same time. And what we could do is we could shorten the length of the tunnel for some applications. Interesting, if what you're interested in doing is, can we create a shorter tunnel if you're doing chips? Yay. It's just a thought. So what are your production problems? Where are you struggling? What can you where do you see the market is not giving you what it is that you need? Where are the existing suppliers, right? I've got an engineer who's willing to take a look at these things, has been building a lot of custom solutions for a lot of people. And how can we go and help you, right? Get a machine which is cost effective, which can help you meet your goals to scale up, but at the same time, reduce the amount of labor on a per item, so you can reduce your cost of goods sold. Because who knows what the cost of cocoa is going, to go, where it's going to go over the course of the next year. We have no idea what any proposed tariffs by the new administration might do. I mean, you're currently not paying any import duties on machinery from anywhere. You're not paying import duties on cocoa beans. You're not paying import duties on cocoa butter. That could change, right? And so if it does, right, being able to find ways to produce the same amount or more with less labor is going to be the only way you're going to be able to control your costs. Or not going to be the only way, but it's a way within your direct control that you can do. So thinking about that. And I had a conversation with somebody earlier today, and we're going to be doing a similar kind of idea around innovations and packaging trends for 2025. So what are the things that are coming on in terms of outer shippers, but also how can you produce short run packaging um, and save money, basically. And what are some of your options for doing that? So that's something that I'm sort of working on planning for an episode at the end of February. And we're going to be talking about that as well. So I want you to know that these are all things that I'm interested in doing to help support the small chocolate maker and small chocolatier community in the coming year, because I think we still have some hard times ahead of us, and we're going to need to focus on all of those things. And with that, it's the end of the episode. So if you're not a member of the Chocolate Life, this episode of Pod Safe Chocolate, like every episode, is sponsored by members of the Chocolate Life. You can go there, click the join button, and become a member of the Chocolate Life today. There are free memberships. There are also premium memberships, which support what it is that I'm doing. Many of the membership levels include free consulting, or not free consulting, include consulting as a part of the membership. And so if you want to engage with me, that can be done through the premium memberships as well. And with that, I want to thank everybody who's contributed today, especially Mike and Mark, for all of your input, because this has been really helpful for me and for anybody else. If you're interested in these things, go into the discussion at the bottom of the post for today. So here is today's post. and you can scroll down to the bottom and join this. I'm not logged in here. So here's some of the discussion. This is what Mark has provided. Oh, Mark, by the way, I'm taking to heart all of your discussions, and everybody can go and read this. You don't need to be a member to read this. Obviously, I'm not logged in, but focusing on the customer service experience, especially from third-party sales representatives. Um, yeah, right. One of the challenges that I have faced representing equipment from companies overseas is how to deal with the support issue, right? And how do you deal with you ask for information about a product or products, and how long does it take for them to get back to you? So I'm very, very aware of the issues that are associated with this. But I think that in the scenario that you pointed out here, you're doing the right thing. You've been contacting company A, company A, company A. You're looking for a piece of equipment. They're not being responsive. There's a company B, which maybe they're not necessarily offering as good a price, right? But they're offering for on the same piece. So they're charging more, but their customer service is much better. Especially, well, pre-sale service and post after sale service are different things entirely. But if they're being more responsive to you now, then it makes it, hopefully what they'll do is they'll be more responsive to you afterwards, right? And that's a great reason for choosing one vendor over another. Maybe you're saving $100 or $200, but if in the process of them selling you something, it's like pulling teeth to get information out of them, I don't know that it makes a whole lot of sense to continue um, down that road. So I would agree with you. Right. With that, um, right. So you're also talking about what about existing equipment that you don't like that could be improved. If you're using a melanger that's belt driven, that's a mistake, right? You want a direct driven melanger, right? So the motor is directly driving the bowl, if that's the piece of, if that's specifically what you're talking about, Mark, as opposed to something that's belt driven. There are non-stretch belts, and so that would be a way to go. There's always going to be some wear and tear, especially if they're V pulley designed. It's an issue, but in this day and age, I don't even like chain driven devices. There's a lubrication issue which needs to go on a cleanliness. It picks up dust. It's just the direct driven motors are the way to go when you're looking at something like a Melanger, which is going to be running more or less continuously for hundreds of hours in terms of their duty cycles. And with that, I want to say thanks to everybody for joining me today. And to remind everybody as I'm checking out, oh, news this coming Tuesday, which is the 28th of January, I'm going to have one of my favorite kinds of episodes, which is an interview and tasting. And I'm going to be tasting chocolate from Embers Chocolate in Phoenix and interviewing Tandy Peterson. And Tandy Peterson, who is the chief everything officer of Embers Chocolate. And so I just love talking with makers. I love eating their stuff, tasting their stuff, especially for the first time, and having a conversation about influences and all that other kind of stuff. So hope you'll join me this coming Tuesday for that episode. And in between time, listen, have a great weekend. And remember, if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, maybe you're doing it wrong. And you might want to reconsider things. Anyway, ciao, everyone. Until the next time.